few weeks ago, Lotus cars revealed this red Excel. Compared with the white standard car, there's more grip on the road and less body roll. That's because the red car is fitted with the latest version of Lotus's active suspension. As these pictures reveal, it's fitted not with normal springs and shock absorbers, but with hydraulic pistons controlled, as you might expect, by a high-speed digital computer. Well, Lotus wouldn't give us an interview, but it is common knowledge that they've been working on active suspension since the late 70s, when they were trying it out on racing cars. Lotus did admit to us that the real secret lies in the software control for the system. And it's interesting that they're working closely with a team who normally work on control systems for aeroplanes. Obviously, there must be sensors in the wheel hubs to sense wheel movement. There must be sensors to detect acceleration and braking. There must be sensors for changes in the angle of the body in all directions. We suspect there must be other sensors, but Lotus aren't saying. And Lotus are still working on the control problems. The central processor has to interpret masses of data from the sensors, decide what's happening to the car, and send appropriate messages to the hydraulics. Well, Lotus have formed a partnership with the American high-tech company Moog. They've modified cars for several other car manufacturers, and they've been taken over by the American company General Motors. We suspect that all this must have a lot to do with the active suspension work. There's no doubt that everybody who drives the car thinks it has a terrific combination of comfort and performance. So, if Lotus can solve the remaining problems, this car may be, as one motoring journalist described it, the greatest single advance in car engineering in the last 40 years.
In America, they've been working on another problem, how to find your way about in a strange town. And one small company thinks it has the answer.
The first commercially available car navigation system in the States is something called ETAC. Now, the name's peculiar, but it makes sense. It's named after a Polynesian navigation technique. They used to get into their canoes and set off between the islands and assume that the canoe was stationary, but that the islands were moving past them. And that's how ETAC works. On the screen, you have a cursor which represents the car, and it orients itself the same way you do, looking through the windscreen, and the map moves around you. Let's take a look. I'm driving along a curved road called Kennedy in the back of an industrial park in Detroit, about to enter deepest American suburbia. And you notice that the map keeps its orientation with the car. The view on the map is exactly the same as the view looking straight through my windshield. So as I go around the road curves on the map. Now, ETAC works with 3 different sensing systems. There's an electronic compass, which is always telling you north, south, east, west. There are sensors in the wheels, which tell you what direction you're moving and keep track of the revolutions of the wheel so it knows how far the car has traveled. That's the dead reckoning system. Take that and the compass and the map data and put them together, and ETAC can make corrections for its errors. Coming up on an intersection called it's Kennedy and Common. If I make a right turn here, let's see what happens. There's a potential error of about 50 feet in the dead reckoning method. So it self-corrects constantly by keeping track of where you are on the map. You turn on to Common, and it knows it. It automatically snaps the arrow dead onto that street. So what ETAC does is as you come up on intersections, as you make turns from left to right, it compares the turn you're making to the map data and makes its most sensible guess. Most of the time, it's a right on. A little earlier, I drove down one street. It thought I was on a one-way street that was right next to it. But when I drove clearly past the end of the one-way street, it knew that an error had been made and put me back on my right course. According to the map, I'm coming up on Lorraine, and indeed, Lorraine Boulevard it is. You'll notice that the arrow is not actually on Common, but as I turn onto Lorraine, it knows that's the only street I could have turned onto at this point, and it'll lock me back in, correcting for the error in the dead reckoning system. And there I am proceeding along Lorraine. You're offered a number of scale views, which are accessible by soft switches. Each of the buttons along the side, and there are 12 of them, access soft switches. They change meaning depending on what screen you're in. Across the top we have our scale, an arrow pointing in the direction of my selected goal, and a little number which tells me I'm 0.6 of a mile from it. Also, you have an indicator for the actual direction of north at the moment. If we're on the right, we can choose to look at it on different scales. You can get a big overview of the whole town, in fact, of half the state, or you can go back down to the neighborhood look, which is where we are. The way it works is you enter a destination. My destination has been entered but isn't visible on a map this size. You can see it on this size as that flashing star there. And I know if I continue on this up to 13 Mile Road, turn left, it'll get me where I want to go.
Important to ETAC's future success is that General Motors expects to build the system into their cars in a year or so's time. At GM's Technical Center, Ron Jameson showed me the sensors which need to be fitted to every car. 2 of the wheels have a magnetic strip on the rim. As the wheels rotate, this sensor generates electrical pulses which are compared with the pulses from the other wheel. In case the wheels have slipped, the computer also consults the electronic compass. On this car, the compass is in a sealed box in the boot, along with the electronics for the system. And the digitized maps are held on data cassettes which run on a player with a special high-speed drive.
Why did GM choose ETAC over other navigation systems?
There were several systems that were looked at by GM, but ETAC was the most technically advanced at the time we looked at them and seemed to have the most promise.
All right. What about satellite systems?
General Motors has looked at satellite systems, and presently there is a satellite navigating vehicle around. The problem with the satellite system right now is not all the satellites are in space to support the system, and the plans to do that have been slightly delayed. Also, a satellite system represents a much more complex system because of the receiver that has to communicate with the satellite. And in addition to that type of interface, you still need to have the map base and compare position to the map, so you're doing the same types of things that you do with the ETAC system.
Essentially, a satellite system is not only more costly, it's a lot of stuff on top of ETAC is what it is.
Exactly.
Well, some idea about what might be coming next can be obtained from this, the Prometheus report. It's a study on the long-term future of information technology and transport. In one sense, at least, it's unique. It's been produced by several European car manufacturers working together. It suggests that by giving drivers extra help, motoring will become safer and traffic will flow quicker. It says that human factors like inexperience, uncertainty, limited vision and slow reactions need no longer be the cause of accidents. For instance, systems at the roadside might integrate with the in-car navigation systems we saw earlier. The driver could receive information about warning signs, traffic jams, or even the location of parking places or petrol stations. Cars could be fitted with systems which could detect the presence of other vehicles, even in heavy rain or fog when the human driver couldn't see. And the report goes much further. It suggests the installation of expert systems to manage this information. For instance, the expert system might be programmed to maintain a fixed distance between cars. Then cars could travel very close together and gain the advantage of slipstreaming. Motorways could be very interesting places. We could be seeing a move away from the car as a personal means of transport and towards a car as a unit in an integrated transport system. Driving would certainly never be the same again. If this report were to be taken up in any serious way, it would bring together manufacturers in several different countries, which in the long run could do wonders to the European IT industry.
Well, cars haven't really changed all that much over the years. They're mostly still, they mostly have petrol engines, they've got a body and 4 wheels, but perhaps today we are seeing the start of a revolution. Perhaps the microprocessor-based developments of today and tomorrow are going to change cars beyond recognition.
Well, next week we'll be looking at the fastest growing use of micros for electronic mail. Now, if you're already using email, we'd like to hear from you. These are the special mailbox numbers to call up. Tell us, in not more than 100 words, please, what you use electronic mail for and whether you have any serious criticisms of the system. Well, that's next week. So, until then, good night.